You're not gonna have any surgeon that's gonna wanna do your surgery, but I feel like I should.
They know what they're doing.
Good, everything will work out.
Oh.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. Let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. And I'll note for the record that all board members are present, and good morning to each of you. All right, we will begin with our agenda. I move to approve the minutes from the April 1st, April 9th, and April 22nd, 2024 board meetings.
I'll second that motion, but noting that I will abstain from the April 22nd
Okay,
meeting vote.
thank you, Ms. Chappelle. Any other unreadiness?
Was I at all?
I think we were, yeah. Ms. Chappelle was absent, you were. All right.
No, I
anyone-
missed
You missed,
the night.
you missed the night. So Mr.
Yes.
McCafferty will abstain from the 9th, Ms. Chappelle from the 22nd, and that's noted for the record. Okay, all in favor, aye? Aye, the ayes have it. Thank you. And we have a walk-on agenda item, Directive 2024-06, data collection notice and cancellation. That is before us. And so I move to acknowledge this directive.
I'll second.
All right, second by Ms. Chappelle. Any unreadiness? All right,
No.
hearing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Thank you. And the chair recognizes Mr. Brian Clary.
Morning,
Good morning, sir.
Frank Larry, Mentor Ballot Department. Before you should have a copy of the post-election audit summary for the March 19th, 2024 presidential primary election. On April 23rd, the ballot department conducted a risk limiting audit. For this election, there were a total of 185,279 ballots cast in the election. A hand count was performed of 2,011 ballots over 3 races. All results matched the official canvas, resulting in a 100% accuracy rate for all 3 races for the post-election audit. Any questions or comments? I'll take them now.
Magic language, 100% accuracy rate.
We like it.
Very good.
No questions for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I move to certify the post-election audit summary for the March 19th, 2024 presidential primary election.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Ms. Chappelle. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. On to agenda item 3, I move to acknowledge the appointment to elected office of James Posh, Cleveland Heights City Council member of council.
I'll second that motion.
Second by Ms. Chappelle. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. And I move to acknowledge the candidate withdrawal from the November 5th, 2024 general election of Cuyahoga County Prosecuting Attorney Anthony Alto, Republican.
Second.
Second by Ms. Chappelle. All in favor?
Aye.
And I move, wait a second, before we get to the acknowledgement, is Mr. Dell available? The chair recognizes Mr. Dell to tee up number 5. Morning.
Steve Dell, Supervisor, CPS. Just want to point out a few highlights and a few extra notes from the report. As it indicates, we had a very smooth and efficient election. Everything went well. We have a solid, reliable team. Once again, I've got this institutional memory of these folks who've been around for like 10 elections, so it's really nice. And they're all adapting to the new equipment that we've been using. It seems like every election, there's something new that we're figuring out. This time was the lightness of the ballots. They were coming out, printing out really dark. And we weren't sure how to do that. We did some testing and adjusted the toner down quite a bit. And then we tested the ballots, make sure that they would scan fine. And that really helped a lot with our toner. We're not using it as much. It really can stretch out and make that much more efficient. So there were just over 8,100 voters. There were, of those, 70 were takeaways. We had 112 provisional voters and only 14 on election day, which is improvement. And then we had on election day, we did have a lot of other folks come in wanting to vote, and we were able to direct them to their proper polling location. There were 194 of those based on the staff keeping track. And another metric that might interest you is on Monday, the day before the election, we did keep track folks downstairs at the back desk. There were 87 folks that showed up to try to vote on Monday, obviously. Because of the lower turnout, we did not bring in the extra staff that we normally do that last week in the meantime. And we just made do with our staff and CPS, and also once again, with big help from the registration department for folks to help us with provisionals. We got some really good feedback on the survey that was posted on the website. And if I could just relate, somebody's going to think they're directly related to how the staff performed. Well, at no time did we have a line extending outside the building, which was kind of nice. And about 85% of the respondents gave the staff a good or very good rating. And some of their comments, their quotes, I love the staff at the BOE. Everyone is very friendly and welcoming. The line moved fast and efficiently. The EFP staff have a great attitude, helpful but not overbearing, which is kind of nice. And then on a fun note, just to close out, I wanted to mention the kids ballot that has really become a popular thing since we've now, in 2020 general election, we did have a scanner then, and since then we've passed out the ballots, but not until last November did we start actually letting the kids scan them. And it's become a very popular item, along with the activity book that we get from the Secretary of State. I think we're really becoming a very family-friendly place for folks to come down and vote. Then the kids can get engaged as well and do their voting. And obviously some of the topics are basic, general, favorite ice cream, superhero. And but these kids were taking it very seriously. We had one girl bring in her own handmade ID to
That's an idea that might go over well for the general public, voting public, bringing in their own handmade. Can we see that activity book? I don't think I've ever seen that. Can we pass that around? At least I haven't seen it. Thanks.
yeah, it points out all the like state insect, flower, those kind of things. A lot of
Fun facts.
Fun facts of the state, and it's got coloring book and some little games.
Ladybug incarnation.
Yeah.
You got tested on that in grade school. All the state things, yeah.
State gemstone.
That's all I have. So if there are any questions,
Nothing unusual to report.
no. Lower turnout than we were expecting, but that's.
I voted early in person here too, and I concur with the staff is wonderful, they're friendly.
Let's balance,
Yeah, I voted, I actually, first time in all these years that I voted early in person here, and it was easy. It's great.
Thank you.
Sure.
I move to acknowledge the early in-person voting PEO performance report from the March 19th, 2024 presidential primary election.
I'll second that
Second
motion.
by Ms. Chappelle, all in favor, aye? Aye, the ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Dell, and thank you to your staff for a job well done. On to election officials. Chair recognizes Ms. Marlene Robinson Statler, or Statler Robinson, I got it. Robinson Statler, okay, thank you.
Good morning, Martin Robinson, Statler, Assistant Manager with the Election Officials Department. And you have a copy of the precinct election official performance summary. I want to call your attention to especially the worker statistics. We had 10% of new workers, so it appears our seasoned veterans served as well. However, after hearing Steve Delp early in-person voting, since he has early engagement, I'm hoping that there'll be future election officials with that early engagement. As we look at our focus, I wanted to call your attention to future worker appointments. Did want to make a note, we have on watch 53 of election officials. So there's two things I wanted to discuss with you. One was we are doing a deeper dive into making sure that policies, procedures, and information from the Secretary of State is being followed and adhered to. However, someone can improve. Because you're on watch doesn't mean that you'll be demoted or removed. It means that you're on watch so we can make sure that you're following those policy and procedures. But just wanted to mention it because the number has increased, the number there. As we look at training statistics, I wanted to mention we tried something new this year. So we received some positive feedback from this adventure. We did an open house. And so the open house model was to allow those election officials, voting location managers to come into the Board of Elections and some of our other training locations and actually touch, feel, ask any questions, have one-on-one hands-on experience with the trainers. And it seemed to work out well, something that we will look at possibly doing in the future. But we did get positive feedback from people that attended that. So I wanted to mention that we tried something new there. And the other area that I wanted to actually call your attention to is opening and closing of the polls. As we do a deeper dive, we have good news. All right, printing and signing and packing the zero reports. If you notice the numbers there, 196 locations signed all the tapes, 90 signed some tapes, and only 4 had no tape signed, which is a great improvement from where we were last time, with 34 locations that we had in question with not completing the reports. So we have some positive news. As we move forward, I also want to mention, when we talk about opening and closing of all the voting machines, and we had 33 locations that not properly open and close the machines, that includes all of the machines. So it means they had at least one machine open and ready for the voting public. But as far as having all the machines ready is the reason why we had to cite them to 33 locations, because we didn't have the additional machines ready for the voting public by 6:30.
So what's the issue on the closing? So if it's the opening is they just didn't have all the machines ready, what's the issue with the closing?
They may have closed one prematurely. And we have timestamps on machines to show when machines were shut down and so forth. And then I wanted to mention handling of provisional ballots. This is a goal where our goal is to have the lowest number possible. Great news, we have improved. So if you notice, all of the areas that we use as far as ballot rejection information that we look at, none of them are above 1%. We have gotten actually below, we're at 2.8% in total for provisional ballots. We made some improvements and some strides. We believe including now information and everything in the yellow bag and being in one place has helped making sure everything is there, and the follow-ups and reiterated during training, and then having an open house where you can open the bag, ask any questions you have or any scenarios you can go over. Also, you notice with properly taking the EPB, we had a great increase and significant positive move towards correctly completing, taking the information on the provisional envelope also. And then I wanted to call your attention to our performance categories on page 3, our final page. One thing that I wanted to make note of as we move forward from August all the way through March of 2024, we've had some increases in properly signing our tapes, and they've actually, since we instituted a new program where all reports are placed in our EPB and ballot scan reports envelope, they've actually been coming back a lot better as far as being signed and reports actually being in one place where we can find them. In addition, if you notice, process provisional ballots correctly, wonderful improvement there. We went from 72% to 58% accuracy. We started to fall in November, and we've gone now to 93% accuracy with that. And with taping the reports and doing a reconcile, we moved into the 87% category there. So this year, some of our goals are improving and updating the election official training manual. updating and improving the training videos that we provide. And we've been partnering with other departments in meeting, having first and secondary meetings. While we do have some time and not as many elections this year to actually do some processes and work together and lots of stuff. Are there any questions?
I just have a question. So it looked like there were 21 locations. So there were 21 locations that had one or more provisional ballots rejected due to PEO error. And then 20 locations did not complete the ballot counting process. Just wondering if those are the same 2021 locations.
No, they are not.
Okay.
I did look to see if there was any pattern or anything like that in most of the categories, and there wasn't any significant pattern. One location had both. It might be one, or wasn't all of them.
Okay. And then for the 53 workers that are on watch, it sounds so ominous they're on watch, but I know that doesn't. What's the plan for them to help? Are they going to be required to go to the open house? Is there going to be retraining? What is going to be put in place for them to hopefully help make sure that they can improve and participate going forward?
Great question. So great segue also. So our plan with them is one, to have a conversation with their zone leaders. Second is our follow-up is that they will be required to attend training, in-person training. And third, we have an open house that we offer to them along with the Zoom session that we have as a follow-up and reiterate right before the election. So we are looking closely at those particular members, and especially if they were managers that we put on watch.
Do we know for those 53 people, the specific area where they were deficient or where they need the extra support, or is it just sort of a general overview? Because it'd be better, it seemed to me to be better to, if we know exactly where the areas were, where they fell short, so we could focus the training on those areas. But are we able to discern what
Yes.
those are? Okay.
Yes, so in short, yes. And what we do is we look at issue tracker, we look at our pink memos and some of the other things that come back on the election, our surveys. And then we do a comment review. And we look at all of that information. The zone leader makes contact with not only that particular person, with everyone that's at the location, so that we can get the feedback from others of if there was a situation where maybe one of the reports wasn't signed. That was one of the situations. We do follow everyone on location to find out what happened and address that person also. And some people are readily understand, the errors that they've made, where others we have to kind of go deeper to understand. You didn't take the slips to the provisional envelope. And so this is something that has to be done. It's necessary for us to do our reconcile. And so putting them on watch, we have a conversation that you're put on watch, and we're going to at the next elections that we have and look at this behavior. But we also reiterate that this is more so a performance improvement. It's not something, we want to correct the actions by educating them. And it's not something where you have to feel like we don't want you to work the elections at all, but we do want to correct the behavior so that they'll continue.
And is that feedback well received?
Most of the time, yes.
And I think it's something too, where I think we still have to further develop, like on those individuals, getting in on those key things, because it is a wide variety of stuff that we want to do. We will be, the Secretary of State hasn't said what they're going to do yet. We anticipate they'll require training for going into the presidential, but regardless of what they do, we're going to require training of our poll workers. Might be a combination. Secretary of State doesn't do it, might be a combination of online and in person. This might be something more where these folks are required to go in person. And we do want to kind of develop more of this open house type concept. Because one of the great things about that was, not for someone on watch, but we have electronic poll books, we had scanners, we had a couple other things. And the people more so gravitated to that area where they're like, man, I'm really good on scanners, but I wish I was a little bit better on EPBs. And they didn't have a time limit. So it wasn't like a traditional training where, okay, bell rings, everyone go to the next station. I mean, they kind of had some of that, but they could hang out and do more. And so what was good is they kind of, without being called out, they self-identified. I wish I was a little bit better on this piece. And they kind of go there and they hang and they do it. And so we want to figure out how can we do that more so in some of our, not on the new workers, but some more of the returning worker type environment, and give them a lot of stuff, but then allow them the ability to kind of migrate over to where they themselves feel like they're not as comfortable. And so it was, of course, evil eyes when I said we're doing this in the spring, but then they're like, yeah, I guess he was a little bit right. And so we're gonna figure out how to do it more so.
This was in our package from the early in-person voting a spreadsheet, isn't it, I think there's one created similar to this at each
Yes.
location as well.
Okay.
So they have that kind of
And so forth.
data that they're,
They're able to act.
because I had seen, when I was a deputy, I saw got an email right after that.
And we provide the grades and so forth of the location to the managers, so they know later on where there's some areas that maybe.
It's no surprise to them today.
Exactly.
That's good.
To your knowledge, is there any overlap between these 33 locations that didn't correctly open and close and the 21 that had one or more provisional? Because historically, generally where there's one problem, sometimes there's more. when you feel
There's
that.
some locations that did have an overlap, but it wasn't the majority.
It
of
wasn't the
locations.
majority,
So
okay.
not all 21 were including the 33.
But a few of them may have
Few of
been,
them,
okay.
right, where they were in, and, because we had some new procedures with loading paper and things like that, and we're working towards some ways to streamline that for the fall, we think that some of that may have been a result of that also.
Right, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Robinson staff? All right, thank you. So I move to acknowledge, the precinct election official performance report for the March 19, 2024 presidential primary election.
I'll second that.
Second by Ms. Chappelle, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Thank you, Ms. Statler, and to the PEO department. On to our registration, I'm going to acknowledge, Chair acknowledges Hassani Weed. We have several challenges before us, and we're going to ask Mr. Weed to tee these up, and then we'll proceed.
I guess
Excuse
just,
me,
yeah, I'm just
Director.
gonna, as Sonny gets set up, I'm just gonna interject real quick while there are multiple challenges here. They kind of fall into 4 different little groups of similar fact patterns, of which one group of individuals are associated with the Cleveland Institute of Music, which at one point in the past, the actual street address of the school was the address that students would put as their voting address, residential address. And over time, the school actually now has a dorm on Hazel, which is right behind the institute. And so some individuals have updated their registration and some have not. So we have spoken with an administrator at the school, and because there's these individuals that are being challenged, but there's more individuals who are at that school address that we will now proactively work with the school, send them letters saying, hey, you gotta update, and then hopefully most of them will. And those that don't, at some point in the future, they can come back and challenge those individuals, but hopefully working with the school, we can, all the students are still students, we can get them squared away to the correct address. So that's one big group. Then another group is the UPS store located in Cleveland, right by Mayfield and Euclid. There are individuals who are have their registration at that commercial address, UPS store. We've done in the past, we had issues with that. We have these individuals there who we proactively sent them a letter back in February with a registration card saying you can't be registered there. Please update your address. Some did, many didn't. And then when we got to the close of registration for the March primary, any of those who did not update their address, we put them in a must-go provisional status. So, because we weren't going to cancel anyone right on the cusp of the election. I think one individual did vote provisional, put the UPS store address back down again, which isn't a good one. So at that meeting, we rejected that provisional for any valid address. But now that they didn't update their address before, didn't update it through the provisional process, we sent out sign challenge, we sent out challenge letters. A couple individuals have come forward with address changes. So we went ahead and we made those address changes, but because they were noticed for a hearing, we kept them on here, but I think those ones potentially would be moved. And then we have that same situation at this would be group 3 at a UPS store in North Railton, but that's only 2 individuals. And then the last individual is a name that you will probably recognize, Norma King, you probably all recite it, 1735 Elsinore. And East Cleveland, she again voted provisionally at that address, putting that at her as her residential address. Tony has communicated with Secretary of State's office and the Attorney General's office, where the Secretary of State Public Integrity Unit is working with the AG's office on the investigation, are working on it. They have not come to a conclusion. So we have this before us to determine in that one, potentially the board might decide and be right to refer for a third time back down again. But
So it's pending.
yeah.
Just before we hear the actual report on these, so is there anything that we can put on our website, to alert voters, potentially under the registration piece? So that they know, I mean, you can't register at a commercial, UPS, I think people use UPS, they have post office
Yeah.
boxes and stuff like that, so, sometimes they would naturally think, oh, well, I can use this. Is there something we can do, or maybe we already do, in terms of educating them on our website, in an appropriate topic area, or, hey, do's and do nots? I don't know if we have anything like that. It's just an informational piece that, we might have to catch that. And then not only on our website, is there anything we can do with our colleges and universities to be proactive to, it's a little discouraging that, the Institute of Music would have encouraged folks to register at, one of their buildings. I mean, and maybe somebody didn't know, but is there anything else that we can do proactively in either case? That's just whatever.
That's actually the comment I was going to piggyback off what you were saying. We do have a few, schools, universities that in Cuyahoga County, and I just think maybe there could be an informational piece with, I don't know if they have like a residence life or some dean or contact we can have with the schools. Maybe a letter just as we go into a new school term.
I think yes to all those things. So I don't think currently on our website on the registration piece that we have information about the commercial address, but I think we could put a simple statement there right on that part. I think we may have something in like an FAQs, but I think something right at the registration tab, we can have something simple there. Regarding the groups, I think what we will do that we're not currently doing is, so we've made a change. John Eddie's great, but we've taken some of this responsibility from John Eddie, say regarding like the UPS stores, and we're placing on the registrations staff. So on our task calendar, far enough away from the registration deadline, there's now a task to go ahead, look up UPS store, look up the FedEx store, and see what are the locations, and we'll manually see, do we have anybody at those addresses. I think you also add the universities, because you have
Yes.
First One and John Carroll, Alden Wallace, Case, Cleveland State, so we do have a few schools, Institute of Music, some of those things that we can put that on there too as an item for every election, far enough away from the registration deadline, reach out, and I think probably like Residence Light is probably somewhere like we do go, and just have that communication with them. And let them know, give them some, they might get some additional information, then say, like looking up a UPS store, like if you have residents, they need, just give them a look at the rules and information with those institutes.
And I'll also just add, once we've identified a location like this address with the UPS store, it's put in our database, it's locked down. Even if an operator tries to register somebody at that address, they won't be able to. Then we will reach out to that voter and send them correspondence and say, notify them at that point that they can't register at a mailbox, et cetera, whatever, and then give them the opportunity to re-register at their residential address. So
Can we do it for every UPS store?
we do.
Oh,
Just so happened, these ones fell a little bit between the cracks.
Oh.
So that's why we're shifting it to the voter, to the registration department, who will go and actively look, hey, what are new UPS stores that have opened up? What are new potential commercial addresses that, so to have more eyes, and as Tony said, we'll have it on our task calendar and we'll do it at set times during the year.
Right.
One of the things that's trickier about the UPS stores is like a traditional PO box will be like Tony Perletti PO box. The UPS stores are the street address of the UPS store, and then it has a box number that looks like an apartment number. So it might it'll be like, say, 11459 Mayfield Road, number 512. And you're like, okay, well, that's an apartment.
Hard to pick it up.
It doesn't say PO, so it's not obvious, like if you did the United States Postal Service, so it actually says PO box. Oh, that's okay, we'll get there.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's a good project.
Yeah.
It is important.
All right, Mr. Weed, are you ready? We're gonna start with items 7 through 13.
Yes.
This segment, okay, the floor, sir, is yours.
Yes. Connie Wheat, registration manager. You should have before you a total of 8 Form 257s, challenge of the right to vote and correction of registration list that was submitted by Mr. Mikhail Alterman and received by the Board of Elections on March 8th, 2024. Mr. Alterman, registered voter in Cuyahoga County, is challenging the voter residency of 8 voters. Ruby Pine, Curtis Lee, August DeBoe, Tatum Hawson, Sirianne Huang, Julia Kim, Kiana Lilly, and Alice Zhang. Mr. Alterman noted in his challenge that 11021 East Boulevard is not a residential address, but that of the Cleveland Institute of Music. Mr. Alterman also notes that the Cleveland Institute of Music has its dorms and off-campus housing on Hazel Drive in Cleveland. Hearing notices were mailed to the 8 challenged voters on April 16th, 2024. On April 26th, 2024, the Board of Elections received a letter from Ms. Davina Hogan, who's the Assistant Vice President of Student Affairs at the Cleveland Institute of Music. Ms. Hogan noted that one of her students, Ruby Pine, received notification that her voter residency was being challenged. Ms. Hogan explained that the Cleveland Institute of Music did not initially own its own dormitory, and that students were advised to use the 11021 East Boulevard address for all mail and voter registration. The Cleveland Institute of Music has now since acquired a dormitory on Hazel Drive. Since sending out the hearing notices, 2 voters, Ruby Pine and Curtis Lee, have updated their voter registrations to the acceptable residential address. This leaves 6 voters that are being challenged that are still registered at the 11021 East Boulevard address. Questions?
I have a quick question, because I mean, there are a lot of students who do live off campus and attend, different schools. They usually register where they live. So, I mean, was there, was this sounds like the school was advising them to use this address? Am I understanding that correctly? I guess it's unclear why they didn't just register where they were living.
I think now that, initially the school was telling them to use the 11021 East Boulevard address. As time has gone on, students have now been advised to register actually where they live. So there's one person that actually registered outside of that Hazel Drive address and has registered elsewhere. So students are basically registering where they actually live right now.
I think part of it is that previously the Cleveland Institute of Music, I think, kind of partnered with Case Western, and they were, I think, were sharing a dorm, but it was a Case Western dorm. So I think they had them put the Cleveland Institute of Music for those students. Since that time, I think the Cleveland Institute of Music actually now has a portion of that dorm on Hazel Drive. So that is the on-campus living is on Hazel. But then there's obviously other students who don't live at, so the Hazel Drive is
So
actually
they were
a
a
dormitory
dorm, it was shared dorm.
with Case
Okay,
Western.
okay.
So it's a Case thing, and now they have their own portion of that. So that's the
Okay,
institute part of it. So they can actually put that address and it would say, for example, go to the Case mail stream. But then there's other students who don't live in the Hazel dormitory and they live wherever they decide, wherever home.
I know, and I also noticed there are 47, I think, total, including the ones that were here. We're just talking about the ones in front of us with the Alderman's challenges. But the others that we're gonna work through, I mean, are they marked in a vote provisional status though, as we sit here today? Because obviously we know that's not a good address, as we work with them too.
Not right now, just because
Okay.
we don't have an active election going on,
Okay,
but like this week, after we wanted to get through this hearing, those letters will go out to the other 39 individuals. And we should then have the whole process of hopefully updates, and then those that don't, noticing the challenge through Husani, and that should all be done within a couple months' time before we get to the next election. But we can mark them as a must vote provisional. The system doesn't hurt anything. It's just that there's no opportunity for them to vote at this point.
fair enough. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wheat, the 8 people before us, only 6 now are relevant because Curtis Lee updated and Ruby Pine, correct?
Correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wheat. Is Mr. Alterman available? Miguel Alterman or legal counsel representing him? All right. Any of our challenged voters? Are any of our challenged voters available or legal counsel representing them? Okay, seeing none, we can proceed.
I would make a motion if I could, Mr. Chair, then that we would cancel the registration at the Cleveland Institute of Music addresses for Julia Kim, Syrian Wang, August DeBoe, Kiana Lilly, Tatum Coxon, and Alice Zhang.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, aye? Aye, the ayes have it. Thank you. Sorry.
And does that, do we want to move then item 10 and 13?
Yes, well, we didn't call their names.
Yeah,
So
they,
Curtis
oh,
Lee,
they've already
yeah,
updated.
We
so
only
they're not even-
read into the
Okay,
record
already
6
voted.
names, yes.
Okay,
But with, I think, Lisa's pointed, they were challenged. Do we
Right.
need to
There's a
make a
challenge
motion that
pending.
is denied because they've updated?
I
Okay.
think just to
All right,
resolve
yeah,
it,
we can-
that's what I was thinking.
Okay, good
So
point.
I move to deny the challenge to Curtis Lee and Ruby Pine, given they've updated their registration.
I'll second.
Okay, second.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Good
All
job.
in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Have the lawyers. All right.
Oh, but
You
on
and I
that
are
one-
we're in it
That's
this
right, yeah, you're
All right,
Okay, Mr. Wheat, we can proceed. The next set of challenges are here. For the record, we're dealing with items 15 through 27.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You should have before you a total of 13 Form 257s. Challenge of the right to vote and correction of registration lists that was submitted by Mr. Hassani Wheat and received by the Board of Elections on April 15th, 2024. Mr. Wheat, a registered voter in Cuyahoga County, is challenging the voter residency of 13 voters. Sarah Amadali, Patricia Antoine, Nia Carter, Ian Charnas, Irene Day, Lloyd Franklin, Isaiah Freeman, Robert Huck, Bethel Pruitt Sullivan, Charles Scott, Alexander Rodriguez, George Scott, and Dexter Starks. Upon a periodic review of addresses in the voter registration database, the address of 11459 Euclid, 11459 Mayfield Road, Cleveland, Ohio, was identified as a commercial postal box. Postal boxes can be used to receive election mail, but cannot be used as a voter registration address. Mr. Wheat noted in his challenge that a letter was mailed to 13 voters on February 2nd, 2024, informing them to update their registration to a residential address. The voter registrations of the 13 challenged voters were placed in a must-vote provisional status on February 21st, 2024, following the close of registration of March 19th, 2024 presidential primary election. Since sending out the hearing notices, 2 voters, Ian Charnas and Deborah Pruitt Sullivan, have updated their voter registrations to an acceptable residential address. This leaves 11 voters that are still registered at the 11459 Mayfield Road address and are therefore being challenged under Ohio Revised Code 3503.02.
Thank you, Mr. Wheat. So Ian Charnas updated. Who was the second name, sir?
number 18 and number 23.
Deborah Pruitt Sullivan.
Pruitt. Okay, thank you. Have any questions for Mr. Wheat? Yes,
Just one question. I know you've listed, these 10 folks, who did not vote in the March 19th election and cancellation of their registration is required. But the other Scott, George Scott, who did vote provisionally, his would need to be canceled as well.
That's
Correct. So there would be the 11 altogether.
Yes.
So I can make the motion, to, if, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
I would move then that, the registrations of Patricia Antoine, Irene Day, Robert Huff, Charles Scott, George Scott, Lori Franklin, Sarah Almadali, Connie Carter, Chester Starks Jr., Isaiah Freeman, and Alexander Rodriguez be canceled.
Second. Any further discussion on the motion? No. Hearing none, all in favor, aye?
I,
The ayes have it.
And then I
Okay.
guess to Lisa's point, then would we then deny the challenge as to the two voters who did update their registration? So I would move that we would deny the challenge as to Ian Chernus and Deborah Pruitt, who did in fact update their registration.
Thank you. Second,
so still.
all in favor, aye?
Aye.
The ayes have it. It is so ordered. Thank you so much. On to items 28 and 29.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You should have before you two Form 257s, challenge of the right to vote in correction of registration list that was submitted by Mr. Hassani Wheat and received by the Board of Elections on April 15th, 2024. Mr. Wheat, a registered voter in Cuyahoga County, is challenging a voter residency of Nicholas Clark and Mark Mesnick Jr. Upon a periodic review of addresses in the voter registration database, the address of 6090 Royalton Road, North Royalton, Ohio, was identified as a commercial postal box. Postal boxes can be used to receive election mail, but cannot be used as a voter registration address. Mr. Wheat noted in his challenge that a letter was mailed to Nicholas Clark and Mark Mesnick Jr. on February 2nd, 2024, to update their registration to a residential address. The voter registrations of Nicholas Clark and Mark Mesnick Jr. were placed in a must-vote provisional status on February 21st, 2024, following the closed registration of the March 19th, 2024 presidential primary election. Nicholas Clark and Mark Mesnick Jr. have not updated their address from 6090 Royalton Road in the voter registration database since the letter was sent. Therefore, the voter registrations of Nicholas Clark and Mark Mesnick Jr. have been challenged under Ohio Revised Code 3503.02.
Thank you, sir. Any of the respondents present or representatives there? Hearing none.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion then that we cancel both the registrations of Nicholas Clark and Mark Mesnick Jr. Because again, we can't have them. This is the UPS North Royalton store issue, I think, so.
Great, thank you. I second that motion. All in favor, aye? The ayes have it. And on to item 30, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You should have before you a Form 257 challenge of the right to vote in correction of registration list that was submitted by Mr. Hassani Wheat and received by the Board of Elections on April 12th, 2024. Mr. Wheat, a registered voter in Cuyahoga County, is challenging the voter residency of Mrs. Norma King. The voter registration database currently lists Mrs. King's address at 1735 Ellesmere Avenue in East Cleveland. On May 23rd, 2023, Mrs. King testified in person and under oath that she does not reside at the 1735 Ellesmere Avenue address. A determination was made by board hearing that Mrs. King's registration be canceled in the voter registration database. On June 24th, 2023, Mrs. King re-registered at the 1735 Ellesmere Avenue address. On November 28th, 2023, a second hearing was held regarding Mrs. King re-registering at the 1735 Ellesmere address. After the board hearing, Mrs. King's registration was subsequently canceled for a second time. Mrs. King cast a provisional ballot at her polling location based off of the 1735 Ellesmere Avenue registration address in the March 19, 2024 presidential primary election. Pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 3503.02, Mr. Wheat is challenging her voter registration status at 1735 Ellesmere Avenue, East Cleveland.
Thank you, Mr. Wheat. Is Ms. King or representative legal counsel thereof for her? She is not here. And sir, you indicated that on May the 23rd of 2023, she stood before this body and testified under oath that she did not reside at this address on Elsinore. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And here we are on May 7th, 2024, still having this discussion.
That's correct.
Okay, I want us to be clear what we're dealing with.
And if I just
Please.
add to that, Mr. Chair, she also testified affirmatively that she lived at a Richmond Heights address. So not only did she not live at the address where she registered, but she affirmatively stated, I believe, she lived at a Richmond, her residence was a Richmond Heights address.
And then re-registered and voted in ensuing election.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question for our council, if I may. So, you know, this is going on and on and on. For some reason, this continues to. Sure. I guess the question for you is whether, Mark, whether or not we are entitled to rely on those admissions from May of 2023, or do we have any that's within our discretion to rely on that testimony, that affirmative testimony that was given at a hearing, or do we have any obligation to conduct any follow-up hearing?
No, I don't believe so. I think you can take notice of the prior testimony that she lived at a different address and had for a long time prior to that. And I think that would be sufficient clear convincing evidence to take another further action or additional action on this re-registration.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, my question is there an ability when if she does keep re-registering to, I mean, do we have to keep having, I guess, a hearing, not, or just an agenda item to address it at each time, you think?
I think that's really the only way to do it. There's nothing to prevent her from re-registering. You can't. And then absent some other, because she could move back there and conditions are different, but absent other evidence to contradict her prior testimony that she doesn't live there. There's nothing else before the board to rely on.
Did we give notice of this hearing and the challenge to her, or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so at some point, I mean, I would expect that would be the argument she would make about why she was registering there, or she moved back, or she intended.
Right.
Or whatever, so, but you're confident that we don't have any further duty, we are within our discretion to cancel based on the former testimony, okay.
Do we have to re-refer this to the election integrity?
We just continue to update them with each.
Okay, it's with them, no, it's
Right.
ongoing, that's what I was wondering. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll just update them, okay.
Yeah, so I will then go, if I may, Mr. Chair, go ahead and move that we once again cancel Miss Norman King's registration at that Elsinore address, 1735 Elsinore Avenue, East Cleveland address.
Second. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor, aye?
I
The ayes have it, is ordered. Thank you, Mr. Weed. And fiscal, the chair recognizes Ms. Shankita Walker.
Good morning.
Morning.
Walker, Assistant Manager. We have before you a resolution to approve for the renewal of our contract with Tenex for our AIMS software management system. The contract is set to expire May 31st of this month. With the contract, there was an option for 5 one-year renewals. We are instituting our first one-year renewal for the contract term, which would expire May 31st, 2025. This contract value is not to exceed $38,000. Open for any questions.
The only, I don't have a question, just a comment, Mr. Chair. Shouldn't the resolution actually mention the name of the resolve clause that actually mention the name of the vendor? I don't see that it does in the resolution. So I would just suggest in the resolve clause where we say we're going to that authorize the director to undertake all actions necessary to procure and subsequently the items identified as the renewal of contract with. I mean, we need to have the vendor identified in the resolution, I think, in the resolve clause, so that would be my only comment.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. I move to approve the resolution and contract for the renewal of 10X Software Solutions Asset Inventory Management Software Systems Contract
As amended.
as amended. Thank you.
Second,
Second by Ms. Chappelle. All in favor, aye?
aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Thank you, Ms. Walker. And our personnel agenda. Okay, I move, Mr.
I just
Rizzo, say something?
Yeah, if you want, I can give just a little bit of background
Sure,
on what we're doing here. So Tony and I, as we're always trying to figure out how to improve our election administration and operations in Cuyahoga County, we're and looking to see potentially what can potentially happen in the future, meaning that the Board of Elections may get a new operations center, depending on how that process goes. We're looking to add a new department to our structure, which would be the absentee services department. And currently, our absentee services that we provide are spread out amongst a couple different departments. So the ballot department has ownership and controls vote by mail, confined voters, which is, for example, nursing home and jail voting, UOCAVA voting, and they deal with like going and picking up the mail and taking care of those types of services, bringing it back during the election cycle. Candidate Petition Services conducts early in-person voting, which is also and then we have a combination of registration, candidate petition services, and the ballot department, and a tag teaming the drop box. So getting items out of the drop box. With the Data Act, we have to provide additional numbers that we didn't have to previously regarding that. So we do these things collectively. And so as we look, absentee voting in Cuyahoga County is big enough that I think it can support a standalone department. And with our 59 communities, we always seem to have double the number of elections that we think we're going to have because of our charters. And so we look to this and we look that with the current proposal of 1801 Superior Avenue, everything that's currently in this building would go to that location, as well as the operations that happen on 4 or 5 at Halley, which are vote by mail, the applications, confined voters, all those types of items. So that would be now at 1801 Superior. And what we don't want is one department that is housed in Halley supervising an operation up the street at 1801. And so as we prepare for that move, we think that the absentee services department makes a real lot of sense. And Jessica King, who had resigned, was an assistant manager in the ballot department, and she was really the lead management person. While Brian knows a lot about that ballot, she was tasked with that. Now she's not here. So we find this where we have this opportunity to create this department. And so we're looking to move into the new building in the first quarter of 2025. So we need to hit the ground running. We have this vacancy with Jessica. We need to make sure that we go through this vote by mail process, which, because it's presidential, we anticipate 200 to 250,000 vote by mail ballots. And so there's a lot going on. And so we want to, create this department that will be a standalone absentee department. To have a department by itself, we think we should have a manager and an assistant manager in that department. Now, as far as a manager, we want someone who can somewhat hit the ground a little bit running, but has the aptitude and the ability to learn what we need to learn in this area, and then go ahead and more fully what absentee services becomes as a standalone department. So one individual in this agency, there's multiple that could do it, but one rises to the top, and that's Becky Brake, current manager of the poll worker department. Becky previously, at one point, had worked in candidate petition services, And so she worked with early in-person voting, confined voters, applications, and she's done all those processes for some time. She then went on to become assistant manager in the registration department, and which only strengthened her knowledge of DIMS, which is the absentee process is heavily rooted in DIMS. But then in 2020, in March, when we had our extended primary after election day, what we did is we split up the application portion of the absentee process from the ballot return process, because we were on our first ever extended all vote by mail type election, as well as voting by provisional by mail, which was, and Becky as assistant manager of registration, we tasked her with overseeing that process in the first floor of this building, while Brian and his team continue to do ballot returns and everything in that. So she has a lot of familiarity with that, with the absentee process, and as a manager now for a few years, she has only honed and developed her leadership skills as a manager, her problem solving skills, and we think that she will be able to, if approved, we would have her go over to Hallie. She would work, we connected at the hip with Brian Clary, learning absentee. We're getting a second Agilis mail machine that was part of our budget that's coming in June, so we kind of need to figure out the restructuring of how that works. And so I think these are all things that she will, when she's interested and she's able and she wants this challenge, she would be willing to take it on. Tony and I talked to her about that. So that gets us now through 2024 through the mail portion, the confined voter portion of the absentee process, with a person who Becky would be, again, the manager, but kind of co-managing those processes with Brian over at Hallie and learning. The staff that kind of do that work now would not be reassigned at this point. They would stay in the ballot department with the understanding that they're going to continue to do this type of work. We would come back later after the election and figure out, do all those individuals come over, or is there even more that come over? We would kind of figure that out as we go through the year. The absentee in-person part of it would stay where it currently is for 2024 with Brent and his team in candidate petition services. Steve Dell runs a really good early in-person process, and we don't want to mess with that. So he would go ahead and take care of that process for 2024. But when all that moves to the 1801 Superior building in first quarter of 2025, then that would be the time that we would merge both early in person and the vote by mail confined voter portions together underneath Becky's oversight. So then what we would want to do is take current absent assistant manager position that sits in ballot, reassign that vacancy to the absentee services department, and then we would post that internally for an employee to go ahead and make bids to apply for that position. And then we would backfill those positions as the domino effect happens with people promoting. The vacant poll worker manager position would be posted externally. We would go out, and if this were to go forward, we want to get those postings out soon so we can get applications in, we can go through the recruitment process, and we can get people on site in these positions midsummer. So as we go into the fall, we have at least the higher level positions filled. And if there's, there happens to be a lower election official position or something that's vacant, we will get through this cycle with a temporary employee or whatever it is, people promote up into these positions. So this is what we want to do. We want to create this department. We would recommend that Becky be the manager of the department. To get the ball rolling on this, we would ask that today we reassign Becky to the manager position, and we reassign the vacant assistant manager position to this department. And that's what we would do for 2024 as far as this department and the staffing until we get past November and we certify the election. And then we come back and Becky being able to observe and see and working with both Brent and Brian, how do we best then fill out the rest of the department?
Good question.
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure I understand the timing of this because, I mean, I'm all for having Becky, serve in this role, but it doesn't sound like we're actually creating a department yet. Because we're not even, unless I'm misunderstanding, honestly, I don't think we're gonna have an operations center. Doesn't seem like it to me. I know we're gonna discuss that later, but doesn't seem like we're gonna have anything. And honestly, the deadline's getting so late. I mean, there's good reasons that we keep status quo and not have too much change before the presidential election. But for the other reasons you're talking about creating, I totally get it. You know, we can take some stuff off of Brian and have Becky. I mean, we have enough of an absentee operation certainly to justify having a department. I just don't understand the timing of it because it doesn't sound like we're going to have a real functioning department with people in it until 2025. And that some of the, you know, stuff that you would want Becky to do, to work with Brian and kind of start, you know, expanding some of those pieces and learning some of the stuff that happens under Brian's leadership over there. That could happen without, I mean, I don't understand how we're gonna have a department, but then we're not gonna people it with anybody. And we're gonna have a one-person department. It just doesn't make sense to me unless I'm misunderstanding the timing of it.
No, so the thought was get the leadership team in place, to figure out, to learn at the management level, what we need to replace with Jessica and do that. And we could bring so get that part in 2024. We could, I mean, we could come back and we know at least 3 employees that Brian potentially would go in this department that are in ballot, and we could make those recommendations if we had to today. And it's some of the line staff that we have that have been working with that process for some time. We were just gonna kind of like let that part not try to be too disruptive in 2024, but we could create a department with staff, knowing that there may be more staff that would go at the end of the year. We thought, okay, maybe after we get through that, maybe it's not 3 that goes, maybe it's 4 that go or 5 that go. We just don't know all those pieces, but we know some of the pieces at this point. So.
Yeah, I'm happy to defer. I mean, I'm not trying to, you know, I just don't understand creating a department of one for an extended period of time if we're really not gonna populate it with people. And a lot of the learning or some of the extra pieces could be done, you know, I just don't understand how we create a absentee services department, but we don't really have a department. That's just my question. And the timing of it, you know, if we're not really gonna have, we're gonna have sort of learning and sort of having having Becky rather, you know, take a look at, I just don't understand why we would approve this now. This is what I'm so confused about.
So we have the vacancy. What we don't want to do is the current vacant assistant manager in ballot. I don't want to refill that as an assistant manager in ballot, but I can't go the remainder of this year with that being vacant. I need to get.
But it sounded like you weren't gonna even fill that until 2025.
No, not the assistant manager would be filled this year.
Okay.
So we would actually, so as part of this, we would reclassify that today and we would put it up for posting by week's end.
Oh, okay.
And hopefully by July, we would have that assistant
Okay.
manager. So then we would have manager and assistant manager in 2024.
Okay.
And it would be more like the election official positions. Those ones, we would reclassify those at year's end. But like I said, I do know, like, for example, 3 individuals for sure that would be coming over into that department. And we could do that today or at the next meeting. Because those individuals really primarily work on absentee processes.
So those 3 people, those ballot positions would not be refilled,
No.
replaced, so they would simply be reclassified over that.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Right, that helps.
Yeah, so through this, we create one additional FTE that we don't have. And Sean Keating and I have talked to OBM, who is going to fund the position. So we explained they're fine with that. And so it does create one additional position that will be funded. And then all the other.
What position is that?
So that's actually Becky's manager position.
Oh, okay.
Because we need to backfill the poll worker manager.
Yeah.
So you gotta have
Yeah.
both of those. And then, but everybody else is a shift. It's a reassignment within the agency.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other unreadiness? All right, so I move to approve the personnel agenda, which is the reassignment of Rebecca Drake from Manager Election Officials Department to Manager Absentee Services Department effective May 7th, 2024, and the reassignment of the vacant Assistant Manager position from the Ballot Preparation and Tabulation Department to Assistant Manager Absentee Services Department effective May 7th, 2024.
And is this, do we have to friendly amend to say we actually are creating an absentee services department? Or do we not need to say that?
I think we have the ability to
To
create
create it,
that,
okay.
but
We have to reclassify it.
We
Oh, yeah.
reclassified the positions. that
Right,
didn't-
but there is no, to a department that doesn't
that
exist.
doesn't exist. So do we need to?
I guess it doesn't hurt to
Doesn't hurt
create.
to include it maybe in your motion.
Yeah, I'll just make a friendly amendment
Yeah.
that we are also creating an absentee services department. For which these positions will be classified to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, clear for the record?
Yeah.
All right. Motion's in order. All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Chappelle. Any other unreadiness? All right, hearing none, all in
Wait, that was
favor?
your motion, wasn't it?
No,
I
Henry
made-
Oh, you made the
the
motion, okay, because I was gonna offer to second.
She made the amendment.
Okay, got you.
Okay. We're all clear?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
The ayes have it. And it is so ordered. Thank you. On to new business. The chair recognizes Mr. Peter James.
Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Peter James, Election and Compliance Administrator. If you would, please refer to the report titled Provisional Voting, Missing ID Rejection on HB 458. I believe this was emailed to the board yesterday. One of the changes that resulted from the passage of House Bill 458, which became law in early 2023, was the acceptable forms of ID to cast a provisional ballot. Prior to HB 458, a voter could cast a provisional ballot using the same acceptable forms of ID to cast a regular ballot at the polls. At that time, prior to 2023, that would be driver's license, state ID, as well as items such as utility bill, bank statement, et cetera. More importantly to the discussion today, prior to House Bill 458, a voter could use the last 4 digits of their social security number to cast a valid provisional ballot. Once HB 58 became law, the ballot forms of ID required to cast a provisional ballot matched exactly those of the new ballot forms of ID required to cast a regular ballot at the polls. In other words, a photo ID, a driver's license, state ID, passport, or military ID, those IDs that you would have to use to cast a regular ballot at the polls is now required to be the ID to cast a valid provisional ballot. So the big change as a result of HB 458 as it pertains to provisional voting is that the last 4 digits of your social security number are no longer valid for casting a provisional ballot. With that in mind, and this came up at the last board meeting, we wanted to take a closer look at what the impact of removing the last 4 digits of your social security number as an option to vote a provisional ballot. What impact has that had on rejected provisional ballots compared to when you previously couldn't use it? And the way we can quantify the impact of this change is by looking at the number of provisional ballots that have been rejected for missing ID since the passage of HB 458 compared to before its passage. Okay, if you look at the first table is looking at the number of provisional ballots that were missing ID compared to the total number of provisionals cast in a given election. The 4 elections above the black line there, the ones that start in 2023, those are the elections, with the House Bill 458 new ID requirements where a voter could not use the last 4 digits of their social security number. Compared to the elections before that, you can see there is a jump there. About on average, since HB 458 has passed, about 3% of all provisional ballots cast, emphasis on cast, have been rejected as a result of missing ID. Prior to that, we were looking at percentages that were below 1%. So the difference between pre-HB 458 and post HB 458 when it comes to the percentage of missing IDs, provisionals with missing IDs being rejected of provisional votes cast is about 3%. There's been a 3% increase in that. The second table looks at the number of missing ID provisionals as a percentage of rejected provisionals. The first one was looking at the total of all provisionals cast. This is looking at those that any provisional that was rejected for any reason, what percentage of those are a result of missing ID. And since the passage of HB 458, we're looking at about an average of about 16% of provisionals that are rejected in a given election are from missing ID. Prior to that, it was about 3%. So again, we're seeing about a 13% increase between pre and post HB 458. In terms of looking at raw vote totals, as it turned out, the November 2022 general election and November 2023 general election, the turnouts was very similar, it was within 1%. So it gave a pretty decent apples to apples comparison to look at. November 2023 general election, this is here in Cuyahoga County, about 100 more provisional ballots were rejected for missing ID compared to the November 2022 election. So if you look back at that table up there, you see in November 7th, 2023 general election, there was 124 provisionals that were missing ID in Cuyahoga County that were rejected. And you compare that to the November 8th, 2022 election, exactly 1 year before, using pre-HB 458, it was 24. So just giving you a sense in terms of actual number of voters, how many were impacted looking at an election with a similar turnout. I looked at statewide data. It looks very similar to ours. Little caveat here in the takeaways on the page 2 of this report is the state combines rejected provisionals for missing ID and mismatched ID. So if a voter did put down an ID to say they just transposed a number, wrote the wrong number down, whatever, the SOS is combining that along with provisionals that were missing an ID. So we couldn't, in here in Cuyahoga County, we're splitting it out by missing ID mismatch. So we can't get an apples to apples in terms of missing ID statewide versus missing ID here in Cuyahoga County. But what I did was I matched what the state was doing and took our mismatched ID numbers, combined it with our missing ID numbers, and then compared that to the state numbers. It's not here in this report, but since HB 458 was passed, in Cuyahoga County, we've been averaging just under 4% if you combine missing ID and mismatched ID. 4% of all provisional votes cast were one of those two categories combined together. Compare that to the state, which is 6.7%. And the takeaway is we are significantly lower than statewide, which is good. And then the same thing holds true with as a percentage of rejected provisional ballots. In Cuyahoga County, slightly under 20% if you combine missing ID and mismatched ID. 20% of our rejected provisionals are those categories, where statewide it's almost 30%. So again, we're doing better, which I think speaks to the fact that we've been pretty proactive in terms of getting the word out, to the voting public that you need a valid form of ID to vote. And that's an extension, also now a valid ID to vote, to cast a provisional ballot that's going to be counted. So I think that speaks well to, the efforts we've done through outreach, work through media, social media, that sort of thing, instructing our poll workers, someone a provisional voter does come to the table, if they don't have, an ID, a valid ID, that they're going to need to be able to correct that during the cure period afterwards. Now, every provisional voter gets the 12H form, which has the cure period hours on it. But specifically, if a voter comes to the provisional table and they don't have a valid form of ID, so that section is being left blank, poll workers are giving out, what we call a 12H express card, or quote unquote the joke card, which just specifically has the cure period hours on there. Like, the big 12H form has a whole bunch of other information, including a number to call to check it out. This one, it's a little pocket sized thing, just specifically about the hours. So that, that voter, they've got 4 days to correct that. So we're just really honing in on that. So, I think, all in all, the takeaway from this is, yes, there has been an increase in the number of missing ID provisionals that were rejected as a result of HB 458. But overall, 97% of provisional voters that haven't cast a provisional ballot are presenting valid ID. We are definitely doing better than the state is in terms of the number of voters that are falling into this category, which I think is a credit for what we're doing. And then, we're just gonna make sure we, double down on our efforts to continue to get the word out that you must have a valid form of ID, which is now a photo ID, in order to cast any kind of ballot at the polling location, regular or provisional.
And I think, so everything Peter said, some of the things that I think we already know that we're gonna do in November, or that we haven't done previously, is when we've talked about, bring photo ID to the polls, it's more so been just in a standard regular voter check-in process. And we're going to start making sure that when we say, regardless of voting a regular or provisional ballot, you need to have that ID. So kind of drawing that out, including the provisionals in our voter education, more so that no matter what, you gotta have ID when you go. So we're kind of gonna do that. I think on the voter assistance table, we'll continue to do the card. That's a, unique to Cuyahoga and other places are, but we're also looking to put a little tabletop sign right there. Again, something where if someone doesn't get a card, they can see right there that says, if on your provisional ballot, you did not provide identification, you must go to the board within 4 days to cure your ballot. So it'll kind of be there too, that they can see that. But again, we don't want to confuse someone who did put it on there. So if they did, they're not coming down unnecessarily. So we would do that. And then we're going to hit harder social media, like voter education. For the first time in March, I don't know if you remember, we kind of created a couple of videos that were single focused, like 2 minutes or less that you could view, but also you could send out through social media. We want to do one of those like in this topic by itself. So more education on this, but also kind of group in just again that concept. And you go to the polls, no matter how you're going to vote, provisionally or not, you need to have that ID, which we don't stress that as much currently. It's always just we stress bring ID, but I think everyone assumes just in the regular voting, a non-provisional ballot.
Yeah, sorry, we were,
Yeah.
I just had some other question. We do send that voter guide out each election where we notify, and maybe we could punch this a little more. I think that would be helpful since we're already sending it out. And that's kind of what we were discussing, just maybe punching that up to what you're talking about, enhanced language. And it's already going out to the voters. They rely on it. It seems to be a great tool to really have people rely on it before they vote with instructions. So I just a thought.
100% agree. I mean, we
Okay.
sent out almost 500,000 of those
Yeah,
to the households throughout the county. So, because on there we always say, bring your photo ID. But
Yes.
again, we leave it at that. And when we can, we can do a little bit more, which that also means for provisional voting too, which a lot of people probably don't have that. And we've had about 40% or so of individuals vote. That's our highest turnout since 458, and we're gonna hit 70%. So there's 30% of folks out there who are gonna be hearing some of this for the first time, probably because they just haven't been engaged. So I think the more ways that we can do that
Good point.
is helpful, and that's a really good tool with that one.
okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Maybe voted since 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle?
Yeah, just to help me square the 97%, the last bullet point on your report. Peter, the good news is 97% of provisional voters are currently presenting a valid form of ID. But we basically are rejecting 15% of these provisional. I'm maybe not really understanding why we are celebrating the 97%, but we've still got this 15%. I mean, I'm happy to celebrate when we can celebrate. I still think this is, to your point, a 15% rejection rate is concerning to me with the small group of voters, when we know we're gonna, in the presidential, have a significant increase in the number of voters and probably a corresponding increase I guess I don't understand, we said 97% of provisional voters are currently presenting a valid form of ID, then why are we have a 15% rejection rate? Maybe I just.
Is that because the rejection rate is based on the total number of rejected, and out of that total number rejected, that's where the 15, that's why it
Exactly,
seems
yeah.
higher?
So what, so tell me again.
So like, you know, it's like, it's 15% of the 167, and not of the total of
So I think
provisional.
the simplest way to put it is all provisional votes cast. Valid and invalid, let's say that's 1,000.
Yeah, it's 1,000.
3% of those are the ones
I see.
where
So
they're
you're having
missing.
cast and rejected together.
Yes, it's just the 15% is
So total.
all of those that are rejected,
Okay.
about 15% are the missing ID.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, that helps.
yeah.
Because every,
So that, like, the categories of rejected provisional, that, if you look at pre to post HB 458, it's the missing ID one that jumped, all the other ones are. You know, basic, because nothing else has changed, that, you know,
Yeah,
the rates of those are
that's
about
the
the
issue.
same, yeah.
And even if you look at just the rejected, like there could be other factors. Like for instance, now we have a new provisional envelope. It's white, it has yellow highlighting on all the areas that the voter needs to fill out. If they're doing a better job with that, and then the number of provisionals that get rejected because they forgot to put their printed name on, then it will elevate other categories. So it is good to look at it from both overall and rejected.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
right, and
That
I,
makes sense.
and I think, and so I think too, what part of Peter's point is, so every valid provisional that we count, they successfully put ID on there. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been valid. And so that's where you look at 97%,
Okay,
because every good one, those individuals got the message and brought their ID, so they had a
Okay.
ballot, but so then you get to that 50, when it was 100 minus 15 is not 97, but when you look at all the goods.
okay, you got a point made.
There you go.
Understood. Okay, my only other, concern is, you know, we don't have any data in your report around the cure period and the numbers, and I think probably because I think in the previous reporting, verbal reporting, it indicated we aren't really getting many people to come back to cure, very small numbers.
Yeah.
So the point, in my view, is we can't be relying on that to say, well, we're gonna, at the front end, we need to be educating folks and not relying on, oh, well, they have 4 days to cure is not enough time. Heck, the 8 days that we had prior was, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
What was it, 8 or 14? I get it
No,
confused.
it was 7 days.
7 days, okay. So well, you know, if they can come cure, in my mind, our numbers are low for a reason, because people are not making themselves, either they don't understand it, or they're not making themselves available to it. Really, our efforts need to be on the front end to educate folks about the ID. So I do appreciate, this report though, because we've been clamoring for it to see. I'm glad we're doing better than the state, but again, Cuyahoga County voters is what I'm concerned about, so.
Definitely, and I would say to your points there, I'll take the 10 years prior to the 458. If we had even this many people come in and cure, I'd be surprised, because, but the last 4 are social.
Right.
So they really didn't come in. So, and you know, to your other point, is that person may not have ID and they may not go to the BNB in that 4-day window. So on the front end,
You know,
really hitting them, you have to, no matter what you do when you go to the polls, you need to have ID. Then hopefully, like early on, right, 30, 60 days out, they're going to the BMV and they're getting their ID. So when they do go to the polls, they're not in a situation where they have to cure because they have that document. And so the more we can hit that, like you said, on the front end, you have to have an ID no matter how you vote when you come. And we're doing that way in advance of election day, then that hopefully will start to resonate with some of these individuals, and they take those steps of, I gotta find my birth certificate, and I gotta do this, and I gotta go down and do all of that in advance versus going, oh man, now I got 3 days and I gotta figure out how to do all that stuff.
And your point, this is a point I think we need to make for the record, because or at least I feel it important to make. You know, when we say, oh, you can go to the DMV and get your free ID, you gotta have documentation to get, if you don't have an ID chances are you don't have the birth certificate and the other documents that you need to get the free ID. So I think it's a little bit disingenuous to be saying, oh, people can go get a free ID at the BMV. If they don't have the ID, chances are they don't have the underlying documents that they need to bring to get the free ID. So this is such an important issue from my perspective, and as the numbers ratchet up for the presidential, it's gonna be an even important activity that we're gonna have to really focus on to educate voters about making sure they have the correct ID in plenty of time. I do really appreciate the report though, so.
Mr. McCafferty?
Yeah, 2 points, through this conversation, I was wondering, how many, do we get a lot of mismatches on requests for, for ballot? I never really gave that much thought.
On a vote by mail application,
Yeah.
a lot of mismatch?
No,
I don't think so. I mean, it's nothing that jumps out.
okay,
I mean, usually the two,
I mean, that's
depending on
just
what.
writing down, maybe you made a mistake, right, writing down your driver's license.
Right, they might have transposed numbers. The two biggest rejections for a vote by mail application in a primary, not putting a party. And in a general election, they mess up their birth date. And those are typically the two highest categories, depending on if it's a general or a primary. But the other ones are nothing that is, pops out too much.
I'm guessing the only people that cure, when I was at a poll, standing by the people coming in, somebody goes, oh, I'm expired.
That could be, yeah,
It happens.
yeah.
Who checks their license all the time? So they can probably just go to the BMV and get it the same day and get another, because all the documentation's.
It's
over
there, that's right, yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it was unsettling feeling for that gentleman.
Yeah.
Oh.
It is.
I almost never look at my license, I don't have to.
I had a TSA agent point out that mine was about to
Oh,
expire.
did it?
Yeah.
That was kind.
Mr. James, anything else? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, Mr. Perlotti.
Okay, the early vote for this upcoming November 5th, 2024 election cycle. So we all know that we've been on this journey to find a new operations center for the board. Both a permanent home, but then also potentially a temporary home for this upcoming fall for the November cycle. Something where we would have more parking, more indoor line queuing. And so, the building has been identified, 1801 Superior, and the process has been ongoing. But this process is taking longer than anticipated, as far as what Tony and I think, and probably the board too. I mean, we go back to January of 2024, and Tony and I met with county administration and talked about what was the tentative plan timeline going forward. And at that point in time, in January, it was introduce the documents to county council February 27th, and then have the second and third readings in March. In March 26th, we come out with a signed lease. And through there, and that would include a temporary vote and for permanent. And that timeline didn't happen. It was actually March 26th when it was introduced to council. And then the goal then was on April 23rd to have the second and third readings, the 23rd being the third, and then we have the approval of the lease. Well, that hasn't happened. It was introduced on the 26th. It's gone through 2 committee meetings already. It's set up for its 3rd committee of the whole meeting on March 14th. Tony and myself.
May 14th.
I'm sorry, May 14th.
Okay.
Yeah. May 14th, and Tony and myself and Henry, at least one. I mean, we've sat through over 3 hours of committee hearings. Henry, a couple hours of committee meeting hearings, and the council has, and they're good questions. The council has questions and concerns regarding, to the administration on the way things are structured and environmental qualities and all kinds of various things. which has not, it just continues to, not get it to the point where it comes out of committee. Board of Elections has not had an opportunity really to speak yet and address the council. The first meeting was just a couple minutes at the end of that meeting. The last meeting, we had maybe 5 minutes. And so council has a lot of questions for us, and so again, they've been invited back to go on May 14th and don't know if that's going to make it out of committee or not. So that's already 3 weeks past, but May 14th is 3 weeks past when we thought we were gonna have a signed deal on the 23rd, puts things behind. Typically, you do 3 readings, so the county may ask administration, if it does come out of committee on the 14th, to suspend the rules and get it passed on second reading, but you don't know if that will happen or get approved, and if it doesn't, then the third, if it does come out on the 14th, the third hearing could be on May 28th. Again, getting further and further down the pathway of where we need to be. And so what we found out yesterday is the Board of Control, which is it's part of the procurement process for the county. The county IT, who was over the security cameras and access cards and all of that, they went before Board of Control yesterday to try to get approval to fund this equipment, to which that is tabled because Board of Control will not take action on this until there is a signed lease. For over $100,000 worth of security equipment that can't be procured until that we get through that process. So if at the earliest, if this lease were to be approved on May 14th, the next Board of Control meeting is May 20th. The IT administration says they anticipate at least a 3-week lead time on getting any of those materials. So all you're doing is getting further and further down the road with not the activity that we need. And so there's other, there's a production schedule too that the company that's been hired by Public Works to kind of keep things on track and maintained, we've already missed a couple of those deadlines on that production schedule. Some of the building permits that said the city of Cleveland can't get passed through until you have a signed lease and all kinds of other things. So it just is really now starting to compound. Tony and I had a conversation with Secretary of State staff last week. We had a conversation with them early on in the process. It told them, what the tentative timelines were and gave them an update where we are. The Secretary of State's office, they were always a little uneasy with us having our first in-person voting in a presidential election at a new place, but they understood that our limitations at this building, and they have a lot of confidence and respect for the skill level of our team here. But now after talking to them, they still have that respect for our staff, but a first time in a presidential on a rush schedule is what they call this. They go, that's not good. So they did not say that we couldn't do it. They strongly advise that the Board of Elections look strong and hard at where we currently are today as we make a decision on as to where the early vote is for this upcoming fall. So that's a little bit change in tone from where we were at the beginning of the year. So Tony and I have all along been working 2 paths because you have to. We've been preparing for an early vote here and preparing for an early vote at the other location. And so where we are so far, as far as preparations for this building is, one is parking. And so as of today, we have secured 90 voter parking spots for non-ADA voters. And then we have about 25 30 ADA parking spots, curbside spots that we would have in our parking lot as of right now. But we are in discussions with other individuals. And so we have like a tentative yes on an additional 60 voter parking spots on top of the 90 that we currently have. So that would give you 150 regular ADA spots, and sometime in June, we should have better information on some of the conversations that we have. We could get an additional 120 parking spaces that we're talking about. So if all things were to pan out with where we are right now, we would be looking about for the fall, about 270 parking spots for non-ADA parking spots for November. And then about 25 to 30 ADA/curbside, which would be in our parking lot here. Now, our parking lot, the curbside and the ADA is within 120 feet to the door, which is a really nice thing. At the 1801 Superior Building, when we started back in January, there were gonna be some ADA parking spots constructed on the north side of the building, to which then a month later morphed to those weren't gonna happen. They were gonna build an ADA parking lot, which was gonna be a permanent, to then which morphed to, we can't do any of that in time for November. And the ADA parking is primarily street parking around the building at that location for 2024. Which, you know, when that gives me and Tony too, I have a lot of concern with that. I mean, the ADA and the curbside, we kind of got to figure it out here, which is good. Now, there's 170 spots, surface lots at 1801 Superior currently, because the parking garage, you can't utilize that. So I mean, that's a nice number, and they're all coming from a general direction. But we've been telling the county we need more, and they're looking, and then I think the county expressed to all of you that there's 2 parking lots that they're looking to procure. However, we don't have a status on where they are in that process, if they have a tentative agreement with the purchasers that hasn't been introduced to council. We've been told that they don't want to bring that before council until they have this lease approved and all that, so I don't know when all that would develop, how it would develop. So it just becomes a little bit, there's a little bit more unknowns than we like with that. So that's the parking part of this. Then you have the line queuing. That building is definitely bigger, we can get more people inside. But as we try to plan and problem solve, because that's what election people are good at doing. I mean, I think what we would want to do is, if we were to do voting in this building, we would look back to what we did in March of 2020. We put a big tent in the back parking lot against the building. We would do that again. And we would have the tent from the front steps down Euclid to the corner of Euclid and 30th. Then we have another tent from Euclid and 30th that comes to the exit apron. And then you have the big tent in the parking lot. From the front steps down the sidewalk to the exit apron is 240 linear feet. This big tent that we would zigzag back and forth, we would probably zigzag back and forth about 4 times. We get about 350 linear feet or more of that. So basically, we're looking at 200 plus voters that would be under a tent within 100 feet of the building, meaning they're in the no campaign zone, which is a little bit, it's easier to manage that line. And that zigzag that we would put in the back parking lot, which we would still, so you have this tent against the building, it wouldn't be where that driveway is, and along that driveway we would have concrete barriers, so you would still have cars come in, ADA, drop box, go out about their business, and we would have people and cars separate. Well, that 350 linear feet, if you go from the exit apron and you start going down towards Chester, and you account for the aprons, you get about 70 feet from the corner of Chester and 30th. So you get a lot of that line that goes down there now is on our property. And if the line does need to still go down the sidewalk a little bit, it's probably not going much past where the apartment building is. I don't even think it gets that far. And part of that too, the difference between 2024 and 2020 is Dell's figured out this on-demand ballot printing, which is time saver. So I think we can have more people on county property under a tent within the safe, not within the no campaign zone, And we won't have to go much on the sidewalk. You know, sidewalk up to the front, but not the sidewalk down towards Chester, because he pushes people through faster now. Now with the on-demand printing. So we can, you know, account for some of that here too. We would also maybe put like a two spot parking tent along the fence on that side, which would be if we have to have any ADA queuing outside, we could do a little queuing outside there underneath the tent. We did that March of 2020. We know how to do it. Is it the ideal and the best thing? Maybe not, but we've done it. We know how to manage it. And what Tony and I have been trying to figure out is how do we make the best bad decision, right? So there's a better bad decision and a worse bad decision. And so, you know, as we try to work through some of these things, it's just, there's more and more unknowns, things we don't have control over. I don't know if county council is going to vote this out of committee or not. And I don't know if we're going to suspend the rules. What I do know, every day we're one day closer to the early vote for the November election. And so I think while everyone put forth good effort to try to make this happen, the process is just playing out. And there's really not much more you can do at this point, except we have to make a decision. And I'd rather make the decision sooner than later because I would like at some point for he and I to be single focused on one location. So then, because there's more to figure out than early vote, right? We got to figure out how people bring ID to polls and all kinds of stuff. And so it's the more we can kind of streamline that and deal with it. I think, you know, we have a lot of the people around here. We've created good relationships with them, with our neighbors, and so they want to be helpful. And they are being helpful, which is good. And again, I think in June, there's, you know, something that's going on. The one building owner who we've utilized in the past, he's currently negotiating in infancy stages of negotiations with a new tenant for his building. So he kind of wants to see how that goes, but he's willing to, once he gets a little bit further down the path, to say, and by the way, you don't get these spots for 1 month. As part of his lease agreement, but that's not the opening statement he wants as he negotiates. Doesn't want these people walking away. So there's that kind of respect that, you know, they have for us, we have for them. So it's kind of good. So I want to get everybody, you know, up to speed on this. My personal opinion is that I think we go forward with this location for November 2024 early vote. I think we have all the security infrastructure here, of which all that needs to be procured and installed at the other building. We have the IT infrastructure. We know it works here because we utilize it. And not that they can't get that to work, but again, it's just, there's more, as everything gets pushed, there's less time to test, less time to react to unknown things. We don't know what construction delays we're gonna have. We don't know what procurement delays we're gonna have beyond as we go on this process. And so, yeah, it'd be nice if all the parking was all coming from one direction. So we may have some voters who park over on the north side of Euclid and some that park on the south side of Euclid, but we can manage it. We'll figure out how to do it. And if the line isn't going all the way down the street, that's a lot easier to manage too, because if you're coming from north or south of Euclid, you're kind of coming to our property and getting line there instead of having to walk past the whole line and go down to the freeway ramp to get in line. So I think there's definitely some pluses there. I mean, Tony and I, we have talked this to death. And you probably don't want to hear about it anymore, but we've also talked with staff too. And staff has always been open, cautiously open to moving the early vote. But now too, they're like, man, this is just, we're pushing it. And so, and the Secretary of State, when they said their comment, and again, they said that we're not prevented from doing it, but you know how sometimes you read between the lines.
We don't have to read between. I mean, you know, we are very much invested in running a successful election. We don't want, at least I can speak, if I may, share this. You know, everybody certainly put forth great efforts. I know they will continue. We're not privy to the lease negotiations with the county. who knows where they are in terms of getting what they need from the landlord. And, you know, everybody's been rowing in the same direction. There inevitably, invariably going to be delays, as there have been, and as there will be going forward. But we can't afford, in my view, to have any more delays. And it's gonna be great at some point to be at 1801. In my view, it's just not appropriate at this time for that to be for this election. We have too much stuff to do. We know how to run an election. We don't want to create voter confusion where there doesn't need to be any, and there's not enough time to educate the voters. You don't have to convince me that we need to stay here and run the presidential election. It just doesn't make sense for us to, even if they could figure out and make a shortened, condensed time frame, and you know, they could suspend the rules, or it doesn't make sense to me at this point to move forward with running the presidential anywhere but here where we know how to do it. That's just my view.
Yeah, I concur. We control what we control. So we control this. We know how to do this. We've been doing it here since 1987. Let's just move forward.
It'll be great when, you know, the stars do align, and that's gonna be a wonderful location to run the operations and everything out of it. It's gonna be a great facility for the staff, for the voters at some point when it gets all figured out. One day, but it's, yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
And I would say to that point, because in the election world, all of us are thinking about 2 or 3 elections at a time. So we're already thinking about May of 2025, and really to get into that building for that, like January, we need to be able to move in.
Yeah.
So any construction delays that happen in this year that because they stopped working because going on makes that harder to happen, because while this is the biggest election and the highest turnout, next year, election administration wise, is crazier, because that's the year that you have the Cleveland primary in September. Cleveland are starting the process of redistricting based off of the census. They may lose 2 wards, which means we have to re-precinct the whole city. Their filing deadline is June. Well, we need to be able to have all these boundaries and everything in place so people can circulate within those boundaries. And so we already looking at all that. When you look for the permanent long-term, we don't want to mess that up, because we can't move, if we miss the beginning of 2025, we can't move in there in 2025 at all, because the second half of the year is just crazy. So I think this helps us, because we really need to start now figuring out how to January.
Yeah.
So to that end, I mean, I would just encourage you guys to continue in the discussions with the county, giving them our critical path timeline for 2025 and what we need. I mean, we're sort of beyond, you know, this year for anything, but I mean, they still need to know what the critical path timeline looks like for us to even be able to be in there in 2025. So I tell you, I do have nightmares around, and it always saddens me when we have the huge presidential, and we've got the voters standing in line down on the side of the highway down there by Chester, and it just makes me crazy. So the more you guys can continue to figure out how to shorten the queue and putting up the tenning and stuff like that will be helpful. But unfortunately, I just don't see how we can do anything different at this stage of the game.
Yeah, and I do think, you know, from the beginning, we had the 2 tracks of preparation, whether it was going to be Euclid or at the Superior Building. And I think just as things have evolved, it just, like you said, we can control at least the factors here. So, you know, and the county was always in favor. They says, you know, you guys make the decision, you know how to execute the election, whatever you go with is, you know, they'll back us. So,
and I mean, we're even thinking, like, we want to move the ballot box to where the ballot box is right now is at the top of a circle, basically. So the amount of people who got to go back forth to try to get close enough. So we're thinking closer to the exit, like 3 spots away from over here, if it's on there. So now they go around the curve and they're hitting that ballot box straight on. So now they can get up tight, put it in, and that even saves time to flow. So we like, we get it.
What are you talking? On our parking lot.
You're still in the parking lot, but take it down and put it about 3 spots away from the exit. So this way you come in, you go around the curve and now your car is straight, and it's parallel to the box.
Yep.
And so you put it right in and then you go ahead, you go on your way and you put the security camera next to it and we have all of that. But we're even like we get into that micro detail because of every car, if we can shave off like 30 seconds a car, putting your ballot in there, that adds up over thousands of people going through. So, and that's the kind of thing that we can't figure out in the new place because we had to live there. We'll figure it out someday, but we don't know that now.
And it includes pedestrian safety.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
All right, makes
All
sense to
right,
me.
so then what we will do is, I'm gonna notify county executive's office, county counsel's office, you know, that, we are all in to figure out how to make January 25 work on a permanent solution, but the early vote for the November 5th, 2024 election will be at this building, not for lack of effort, but
Yeah.
for lack of not having enough time and money. So.
Thanks for that.
Thank
Okay.
you. Anything else, Mr. Bellotti, before we turn over to Mr. Gallagher? All right, the floor is
All
yours.
right, well, good morning. I wanted to give you a brief update on the Data Act and our DIMS voter registration database. As you may recall, back in July of 2023, lawmakers included funding for the creation of a state office of the Data Analytics and Archives Agency. The office will fall under the Secretary of State's office, and the agency will basically function as a central repository to collect and retain information of voters' transactions, voter history, even things as extensive as how, when somebody votes by mail, how was that vote by mail ballot returned? Was it dropped off in our Dropbox? Was it returned by mail? Did they personally bring it in here and drop it off? So all of that is in the legislation, along with some additional things that the Secretary of State was including with it. And that's all set to go live in January of 2025. Okay. So in the last couple of weeks, though, Director Prelati and I have had some communications with ES&S, our current DIMS voter registration database provider, and they've notified us that they're unable to support all of the requirements of the Data Act legislation, as well as the additional information sought by the Secretary of State. And DIMS and the Secretary of State's office are actively working together to come up with some solutions on how to move forward. So our DIMS voter registration database is probably over 20 years old, you know, the technologies associated with it. ES&S doesn't want to pour in money in fixing the current, rather take their Power Profile platform that they recently developed for Alabama.
Shame, excuse me.
Yeah. And to add additional Ohio requirements, and hopefully they can have that ready for November of 2025. We're not too comfortable with the timelines, to be honest with you, for them to take an existing system, add on different parts of it, you know, even when something is introduced, there's always bugs to work out. So just aside from that though, so let's look at some of the things that the knowns and the unknowns with it. What we do know is that the voter registration system touches all the departments of this agency and everything throughout the voting process. It's used to not only register voters, but hire poll workers. We use it in creating the election, putting in the candidates and issues, verifying petitions, duplicate resolution, vote by mail applications are processed through it, provisional verification. Really, it touches everything. And what we don't know, though, is exactly within a presidential year, as we're preparing for a presidential year, to be transferring to a major or different voter registration system would be extremely challenging. If the voter registration is considered, you know, so that there again, as they're built, as ES&S is saying, they'd be building this new one, is this a new system or is this an enhancement of an existing system? Because if it is a new system, well, then are we obligated to go out for bidding and go through the whole acquisition process?
Does it have to then go to the Board of Voting Machine Examiners? Would it have to go through that process to get approved?
I don't, voter registration systems are not, they're not part of that.
Oh.
there's been legislation that hasn't passed that they want to add voter registration systems to the list of certified equipment, which in my opinion makes sense. It's probably the most complex thing that we have, but it currently isn't.
Okay.
But yeah, I didn't know.
So Calvin, so is the Secretary of State, if implementation is January 25, and we're concerned about doing all this, can we get a reprieve on,
Yeah, so
okay,
actually, that,
sorry,
I,
all right,
no, but that-
jumping ahead of your report, sorry.
Okay,
Okay.
Well, I'll jump to that. So DIMS has put a request in to get additional funding from the state to help update their power profile for Ohio usage. Even if they get that additional funding, our costs will go up between 4 and 5%. 4 and 5 times what we're paying right now. Okay.
On the old system, on a 20-year-old system?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the new
No.
system would be more expensive.
Okay.
4 or 5 times more.
Oh, okay, good.
Right. We are hoping that the state and DIMS can help determine, like, what are the minimum requirements for January? What are the things that maybe you could take the existing system, check off some of the boxes and realize that some of this other stuff might have to be grandfathered in till next year, where we have more time to kind of vet and go through the whole process and determine, do we want to go with, is power profile going to meet our needs, I mean,
That's a good question.
again, so our hope would be that if the state is able to work with DIMS, figure out, look, what are the major, what are the requirements that they would need for January, take our existing system, because another part of what they do is they take snapshots of our voter registration database. The Secretary of State's office will collect that data, and basically what it does is to help groups that want to collect information statewide to have one central repository, also to help streamline some of the ways certain terms are defined. But what we're concerned about is, the acquiring of it, the voter registration system, the installing of it, the testing of it, and the implementation. We want to have a sufficient amount of time. So obviously, they didn't anticipate that there would be this much of a, difficulty with DIMS, but being as what it is, we would much rather proceed with thoughtfulness and, good planning rather than trying to rush into something with that. So we wanted to give you an update regarding.
4 times the cost for a system we're not sure of. Maybe that is a rebid situation.
Well, and so here's what, and this is where, keep Mark busy enough already, but this is, what I don't understand is if they come up with this new system,
Right.
okay? And, but they're saying it's just an upgrade to what we currently have. I don't understand why we would have any additional cost increase, because it should be an upgrade. And then the licensing, so you pay annual licensing and maintenance on this.
Right.
And so what they're saying is, right now we pay about $60,000 a year. I will say we have a sweet deal, but that's because of the lawsuit that came out of it. That 60, they're saying, it'd probably be about 310,000 a year for licensing. Well, exactly. So I don't understand how you can increase that. Well, that sounds like that's something new. So does that mean then, is this a new system that in fact we're required to go out to bid? So then if we go out to bid, whether it's them or one of the other, I think there's currently 3 vendors that provide voter registration services in Ohio. It's DIMS, Triad, and 10X. And I think any of those systems, if we were to go out new, we would be looking somewhere probably between $300,000 to $500,000 a year in licensing and maintenance. But we would also be looking at probably $300,000 to $400,000 one-time implementation fee. So none of that is budgeted. We weren't planning for any of this. And what DIMS is doing is that 310 is for the licensing. They are asking for the secretary. So through the Data Act, there was funding that was given to the state for them to distribute. They're asking for basically the state to fulfill a grant for them to pay for their development and design of this new system, which I think the state maybe might not be on the same page, saying, wait a second. These little things that need to be, or the things that need to be changed for Data Act compliance, has nothing to do with poll worker recruitment or showing, or whole place assignments and all that. So like, why do we have to pay like $900,000 for a new system So
Yeah.
by the time, I feel like we're always talking about deadlines that we don't control, so they're gonna be going. And then they're gonna be like, okay, Cuyahoga, you need to comply, so. It's a mess, and the state doesn't have the answers yet, DIMS doesn't have the answers, and so. You know, one of the things we're talking about is starting to work with the team to create a request for proposal, because that'll take some time to put that together in case we're not grandfathered or given any kind of extension, so we can be prepared for that. And then if it comes to that, and then I have to go start telling county council, by the way, gonna need $1 million that we didn't know about. And so it's just a, you know, it's a good thing it's a slow year this year. We have nothing.
No, well, so this is an ongoing thing that's to keep on,
Yeah.
all right.
Give us a grant.
I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
I get it.
I think not only on the same, the recurring theme on it being like the Secretary of State's office will certainly appreciate this. We're at the point where we don't need any more changes, where I have to comply with new additional requirements and stuff. From here through the end of the year, we've got to run the election and all that kind of stuff. It just seems to me, I mean, I think they'll get it.
Yeah.
The very same reasons
Yeah.
that they were sort of we're all on the same page about not implementing and moving forward with 1801 Superior. I just don't think we are able to figure out everything associated with compliance with the Data Act. So if we can get a reprieve, or they can postpone it and grandfather in what I'm just appalled. I mean, the hearing, how they would ask the state to give a grant so they could have a free way to then come back and charge us some extraordinary amount of money to have to implement a new system. It doesn't make any sense.
No,
It doesn't, and not that, you know, the state of Alabama doesn't have great elections, but it doesn't have Ohio election law. So you're taking that and you're trying to make this work for that. I mean,
So we want to have a choice of, if there's 3 potential vendors that provide this registration system that we want to be able to hear from and have them compete for our business. It just doesn't make any sense to go with one vendor from my perspective. So.
No, I agree. We can't afford that, again, rush job, right, the thing for today. You can't have a rush job system come in that, like Tony said, literally impacts every aspect of an election. And even current DIMS, when they would give us updates, which we haven't had updates in a while because they don't make them anymore, but this was always the case. Maybe even Henry remembers this. It comes in, here's your update, fixes 3 things, breaks 2 things that it didn't expect. And through our testing, they find that out, and then you gotta go back and do that. So this is gonna be the same thing, and it's just, it took us 5 years to figure out what voting equipment we wanted, and then, you know, to get the voter registration system, like, in this time.
We generally don't rush into anything.
No.
We test, we explore, we have feedback, we, you know, for all of our equipment purchases, we have not rushed through a process, and I don't think we should do that. And hopefully they will allow us to, we obviously fully intend to comply with the Data Act, but if they can give us a reprieve and push this implementation back, that seems what makes sense, I would think.
Yeah, and just as there's currently 15 counties that utilize DIMS. The second largest after us is Stark County. I don't know, they have 100,000 or so registered voters, which, okay, that's good, but that's, you know, no one is close to us, so no one, I don't think, would have the challenges that we would have, but, you know, that at least it's not a Cuyahoga problem, it's a 15 county problem.
Well, it's a larger problem.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Dave. That was very interesting.
Anything else, Mr. Kelly?
No, that's it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Chair has received 1 request for public comment. The Chair recognizes Maria Molinas. Is Ms. Molinas still present? Well, Ms. Molinas, if you would just spell your name for the record, and you will have 5 minutes, and our secretaries, the board will begin. Thank you.
Maria, Maria, Melendez, Melinus.
Floor is yours. Mhm.
Sorry. Here, I had something that I was gonna read off for y'all, but this is disturbing. I'm sorry. We have an election, presidential, every 4 years and you wanna do changes like last minute now? Really? Come on. That's just ridiculous. You guys say we don't have any, I'm so disgusted with y'all right now.
That actually was.
We don't have any election trust and you guys keep pushing that over and over again. Last meeting in April, one of y'all ran out to Medina to a meeting that was taking place there. And I understand we're not welcomed very much with your questions. I am an election official in Cuyahoga County. I'm very much intrigued with the scorecard. And I really appreciate the fact that you say we don't want to paint with a broad brush. And really you like to look at individual detail, individual voter records. And I think that is the way that you do discover what happened. So I'm a little bit wondering if because after certification, boards of elections have 2 weeks to apply voter history. I mean, that voter history is captured, but then they upload into the state. Is it possible because certification would have been at the end of November and you're talking December 10th? That there were counties that were within that 14 to 15 day period where they could upload to the state voter application registration database. And that accounts for the discrepancies. She said, no, I'm not saying from the unofficial to the official count, but after certification, they have 15 days to upload the voter history. The issue is not whether or not there are legitimate updates being done by legitimate county officials. The issue is that it leaves open the potential for illegitimate updates to be done by illegitimate actors who have access to the system. And she continued to say, we have proven that the state voter roll database is breached. The State Board of Elections doesn't have control of it. That's you guys. They won't acknowledge it. We all know that. Only Board of Elections have access to data lines to our people. The law, when the law is being followed, when the law is being followed, the problem is all of these errors and potential violations of law add up to a determination where you have to say, and this is literally the term in cyber parlance, it's a total loss of control breach. It's not a situation where it's borderless maintenance update issue right now. Let's see. It has to do with control point where registrations are getting added to the system that don't meet any standard legal compliance. How come there are 1.2 million of them in Ohio? That's not inexcusable as clerical error, which we know Frank LaRose is trying to push it off as clerical errors. The question is there total loss of control breach in cybersecurity parlance of Ohio state voter roll database? We have to be curious. We have to be open to the possibility that during the 15-day period, good election officials doing their jobs correctly are not being joined by nefarious actors who have gained backdoor access. Let's see, Board of Election guy says, but I would just say that the inconsistency that you're saying of 1.1 million, and then after within the legal time for boards of elections to update, and then it goes down to 3,000. But the law violates the principle of reconciliation is what she said. That's the problem. Board of Election guy says, but the Constitution has one set of, and she interrupted, but it's not voter fraud. And I think for people, I didn't say it was voter fraud, it was election misconduct. But I think what I want for people to have confidence in our election systems, we keep hearing that over and over again. We have to fix this, is what she said. That's the only way for us to have confidence in our elections. We have intractable political adversaries all over the country. And we just want to know what you're in possession of is dead accurate. And right now, we don't have confidence.
Ms. Miletus, your time has expired and
That wasn't 5 minutes.
It was 5 minutes. Your time has expired and you are excused with our thanks. Thank you. All right, no other business before us. I move to adjourn the meeting. Been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, aye. The ayes have it. It is so ordered. Have a great day.